So I'm going to make a video analyzing my own video. We're going to get very alchemical and do a very self-reflexive kind of operation today. Aaron Schwartz suggested this to me. You should make a video commentary explaining all this. So thank you for suggesting that, Aaron. That sounds like a good idea. I have to say, one of the things that motivated me to make this video, Radical Rewind, was to try to put into pictures things that at the time I found it very difficult to put into words, and still find it quite difficult to put into words. So it's a bit of a challenge to explain it, but a good challenge. And I think with our pen environment, we should be able to do an okay job. So this is a piece called Radical Rewind, that a video alchemist named Jordan Barty made in 2019. And this is a film about something that can be understood about human creativity, and in particular about the human propensity to create images. This video is designed like a kind of puzzle game. At a very basic level, I'm asking people to consider what might be common between these images that I've framed in gold. You know, there are many such images here that I've placed in Radical Rewind. This is a particular selection of images from a particular selection of films. We'll get to all this detail in a bit. I do want to go through the film more or less linearly. Gosh, you know, it really is hard to determine at what sort of pitch to discuss this, because the film is a puzzle, the film is a game. I'm asking you to do a particular series of mental maneuvers when you watch it. It also, of course, is a real kind of piece of personal art that, you know, I have to say carries a good deal of my pain, actually, is in this piece. This is a piece that was made, like klezmer music coming from somewhere. It's a piece forged rather in blood, so there is this aspect to it. I guess we'll just talk about all these things as we go through it. Maybe the best way for me to do this, since, you know, in a way I'm now the worst person to do this, it would be better if some other person did this sort of analysis on my piece, because I'm going to focus on particular things that track my intention. We might miss things that weren't tracking my intention, you know. But anyway, I decided to open this with a little, essentially a tiny prayer for the dead. So this is a scene from Hellraiser 3, which is a film that I believe, I don't know how else to put this, I just say it this way, it received the image of 9/11 in an anticipatory way. Many of the frames in this film seem to me to map aspects of the 9/11 image, considered in multiple ways. It maps aspects of the image structure, and it maps aspects of the symbolic space that the structure implies, which I call the projection space. We'll discuss all that over the course of looking at Radical Rewind. How I came into this work and how I discovered the matches is a very long story that I don't know if you have time to cover here exactly, although we probably have to cover a little bit, because this is a little bit a piece about that. It's a piece about what happens to you if you look at images in this way, or what might happen to you if you look at images in this way. And so here's this selection from this film. We're opening with it. Pinhead is the principal figure here. Pinhead has an intense double meaning for me. He's a Christ figure, a dark Christ. He's a god of the inseparability of joy and suffering. Pleasure and pain is how they frame it in this film, but it's really a deeper idea. It's not just pleasure or pain, it's joy, suffering, enjoyment. But then he's also like a radio receiver. It's his antenna coming out of his head. It implies he's a prototypical image of a kind of a sinkhead god that we haven't seen the full image of yet. That's my opinion. So here he is saying his little monologue here with all of these dead piled up, and these are explicitly in this film. These are kind of like the dead of war and of history. So Sense Radical Rewind is a piece about 9/11 and about the ghosts of 9/11 on some level, whatever level you'd like to receive that idea as a metaphor or as a literal statement. I relate to it on both levels. This is a piece about the ghosts of 9/11, and so I wanted to open with this little statement of the dead. It does have a bit of a double meaning because it's also, death and sleep are related. And so it's as if we have an image of people sleeping. And of course, actually, this is an image of people pretending to be dead. So maybe they actually are sleeping. Maybe some of them have nodded off by this point. I don't know how long it takes to set up a shot, Basically, we have an image of dead people or maybe also slumbering people. And then I've paired that with, actually, there are two Chromeo songs in this. The main song is One Track Mind. But here I quote a different song. It's called just Don't Sleep or something like that. But the lyric is, You've been sleeping on me. And I thought that was really nice. It seemed to somehow relate to the dead. This structure here in the center, I'm just quoting the New World Pictures logo. New World Pictures was a video production studio that, made a lot of stuff, a lot of horror movies and so on in the 80s. And they did a number of the Hellraiser properties. And I love it as an image, just these flashing rays. It's also some kind of a self idea, a mandala idea that opens it. I've said it in my usual wave warp frame here to imply, I don't know, a kind of living spirit moving through the image or something like this. And it's also an image that is already talking about frames and about the idea of a frame within a frame that is now going to meet the border. And then we hear, You've been sleeping on me, New World Pictures. New World Pictures, which is now a logo that's covering an image of the dead. So you see what I mean to imply here is that the dead sit behind this image. Behind the video image is something ghostly. And then you've been sleeping on me in the sense of you've been ignoring this layer of the image. And if you can find it in yourself to perceive this layer of the image, then you will be living in a very new world. So that's kind of the sequence of implicit ideas that I was trying to build into the understructure, if you like, of the opening of this piece. It also is just a nice way of, directing people towards these properties, towards films made by New World Pictures and towards the Hellraiser films in particular, because we quote it. Okay, moving on to the next section. This is fun. I like talking about my work. Then we bridge into this thing, which is, it fulfills multiple roles here. On the one hand, I just wanted to credit the musicians, because I have an ambition someday to make my own music videos set to my own music that are going to be sync videos. And so I don't want there to be confusion someday about, like I was plagiarizing something here. I'm explicitly working with this Chromeo song. It turns out, this is one of these weird syncy things. Like this, of course, was not planned. Here, when I'm working on a video like this, it often begins with the music. So I'm hanging out, I'm listening to Chromeo, and I'm just taking long walks. This was in Montana. I was taking long walks on the train tracks near where I was living, listening to this record kind of on repeat. There's this track, One Track Mind, this song, One Track Mind, which it started to feel to me as if it was describing things about me. I was kind of syncing to it. And I was thinking, okay, this song, One Track Mind, it's about my video obsession. And then you start to imagine how you might score it visually. And so it grew out of this music. And so then I was very amazed to discover later, when I did pay attention to it, it's like, oh yeah, it functions as a strange kind of match. Because we've got red on this side and blue on this side, which is one of the aspects of the 9/11 image that I think can be noticed as part of these high-dimensional match structures. So we kind of have two figures here, one in red, one in blue. Sunglasses is a prominent aspect. And then there's a kind of an androgynous implication here, obviously, which relates to ideas about the union of the two becoming one and so on, which is a thing synchromystics have been talking about for a long time in relation to the 9/11 event. But I'm telling you that I'm stealing this. It says unauthorized, but it's also about the idea of an unauthorized. It's still, every frame of this, I'm trying to have it do multiple things in multiple contexts. So I'm telling you about the source material. I'm telling you what song I'm going to use. And I'm telling you that Chromeo has nothing to do with this. That I've just taken their song and made some weird music, my own weird music, like fan video for this Chromeo song. But then it also is telling you that this image itself may be an unauthorized transmission. It may be related somehow to non-local or precognitive structures because of the properties that you might see in it. And so this is maybe the first image. Well, no, it really does begin here, because we have red down here, red blood, and then pinhead is up here as a pinhead. So this constitutes a match already. And I even sort of give you the dividing line in the middle, right at the start. Now that match, the Chromeo match, that's such a strange area, because I don't know. It starts to feel to me like that album cover is the way that it is because I quoted them in this film. I put them in this film and then that spilled back something. Well, I know that probably sounds quite crazy, if you can even understand what I mean there. But anyway, I transitioned here into a quote from Back to the Future Part 1. This is George, Marty's father, and he's spying on Lorraine here through a pair of binoculars. Again, I'm right away highlighting the idea of frames, right? We're dealing with frames. And then here George is going to look into some frames, and you'll hear here in the, i.e. binoculars, as he grips this strange tree. I just find this such an interesting image. And you'll notice that in the audio here, Dave, in the band Chromeo, is saying, I just got fixated on somebody. So I'm playing with the lyrics very deeply in most of these areas. The lyrics are motivating many of the image quotations. It really was that way. I was like, I just got fixated on somebody. I'm like, okay, well, that's great, because it right away is about the idea of visual fixation, which might express some of our feelings about the 9/11 image. But then here we'll already metaphorize it as a man looking through binoculars at a naked lady, which is a match. Here the match is expressed not in a literal image space exactly, although it sort of does in the next frame, but just in the idea, in the scenario. This scenario tracks a mythic scene that I believe exists implicitly in the 9/11 image. It's kind of like this guy in glasses with smoke flowing out of his head. And he's watching something happen that's quite some kind of a spectacle. Violent, sexual, death, exuberant flower spectacle. It's hard to describe this. We'll see it when we look at the projection map. Maybe he's looking at the birth of a child, in fact, or a mutant, or all kinds of strange things. We don't know what Kid A is exactly, but Mr. N is observing it, and Mrs. S, who's kind of more implicit in the 9/11 image, is giving birth to it. And so this sort of basic idea is contained here in this scene. See? Here's Mr. N. Here's Mrs. S. Here's this foliage that starts to imply something like an explosive situation, and here's our twin pillars. Yes, indeed, we can see that we have a very strong red element. The door down here is red. It's also this kind of structure here. So that's a little match. Now, so far, I don't know who you are and what your ideas are about all this, and if you know anything about my channel and what we do here and all this. What does it mean when I say this is a match? I mean, fundamentally, I just mean that you can form correspondences between this picture and a certain other picture, which I think is the 9/11 image. And it's a multi-point correspondent kind of thing, right? The explosion goes here in the 9/11 image. And so in this image, We don't have an explosion, but we have this thing that kind of looks like an explosion, and we have this red stuff down here. So that, see, that maps. We also have in the 9/11 image, we have something that looks like, if you look at the wound on the North Tower, it has the look kind of a pair of binoculars. So that image is consistent with an image that we can imagine in a shape that's contained in the 9/11 picture. So what does that mean to you? You know, I don't know what that means to you. On one level, you can think that Radical Rewind is simply a piece about seeing 9/11 everywhere. And it works on that level, I think, I hope. This can be a piece about trauma and just what happens when you repeat your trauma everywhere over and over again until you grasp it consciously, bring it into conscious awareness, and then transcend it. So that is what Radical Rewind is about. I also think somehow that's what 9/11 is about as a world historical event. So it's all very synchronized from the get-go, I would say. Sorry, Aaron, you asked for it, so now you've got to actually listen to my strange artist explanation of what's going on here. I warp it, again, to imply this, you know, this is a magical image, and there is mana flowing through it. It also has the effect of creating a kind of Aquarius glyph. It waterizes the image. So I like that effect. Then we flash into the title. A bunch of things come together for me in this title. First of all, I'm trying to keep the handedness running throughout the entire video. Like I don't remember if I exactly hit this, but my ambition, you know, was to have this basic. Oh, let's think it's much bigger. Was to have this basic scheme never violated. And on this side, here's our S. I also like that, you know, we have red, blue, and then in the background white, which makes it instantly look a little political. And then I tried to highlight that with the typeface as well. So we're talking also perhaps about two aspects of the nation of America that might need to be reconciled in some way. And then here we have the Circle K. This is the logo for the company Circle K, which appears in Bill and Ted, which is another film that I think receives 9/11 precog. So there are lots of little references in here that if you know what properties they point back to, you could go watch those properties. And by properties here, I mean like film properties, you know, like film franchises. You could go watch a Bill and Ted film and watch the structure manifest in it again. So, and I think I have it rotating, is it counterclockwise? To imply the rewind, right? So now Dave is saying here, you know, he said, I just got fixated on somebody, and we had the little George Lorraine match. And now he says, and when I say somebody, there's a kind of natural break there in the song, because it's kind of a little joke line. This is kind of, you know, Chromeo's a pretty funny band. So they've made a little joke there and accentuated it by dropping out the whole rest of the track. It just lingers on, I mean you. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. We'll just cut to the twins, because now I'm giving away my joke. I have a fixation on the Twin Towers, is what I'm telling you there, without saying that, by just letting a coincidence between what's happening in these song lyrics and this image that I cut to maybe try to tell you that. I've done two other things here, and I've used the classic drama, you know, sort of laughing and crying, in emoji form. To tell you this is also going to be something about the nature of electronic images and image transmission and communicating something through images in an almost hieroglyphic way. But it also is telling you that I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the things that I'm about to show you in the video, you understand. And that is a very true statement. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just laugh in an insane way often when I perceive these things. I like the idea also of putting it at this angle to imply a postcard, you know? So this obsession's much more than a hobby. And now we see George falling off this branch. So his obsession has led him into a very dangerous situation. He's about to die, actually. I mean, not really. He doesn't die in any of the timelines. He's about to just injure his head, but he could die. So the subliminal implication, I would say, in this scene is that this is a scenario that to witness it might lead to death, or at any rate, to be obsessed with it might lead to death. And of course, I want to play with that with the idea of the ego death, but also with the idea of an obsession that might really harm you. I believe that what myself and other people have worked on as pertains to the 9/11 synchronicity question is very, very, very important work. Of course I believe that. I would not have made the sacrifices I've made in my life for it if I didn't believe that. And yeah, I've been the subject of ridicule from various people, and we've all experienced this kind of stuff in the sync community. There's no reason to harp on it. People don't get this stuff yet. However, not to be sort of take too serious here or whatever, but like, really, though, I struggle with these questions and with these feelings. And so this is really my attempt to say a little bit about that. Like, I'm never so sure I'm not going to fall off the branch, And then I wanted to augment that with a downward motion on the frame. And so keeping this as explicit, we're looking at video frames. Also, it turns the videos into cards as if they might be in a deck of cards, which I think implies the idea that I might be showing you something like a card trick. It brings in the idea of a sleight of hand magic. I don't know what that shape was. What does that have to do with cards? And I try to do nice formal things. So you notice that right when this lands, we get a cut in the internal movie. Or actually not the cut, but here I scored it with boots hitting the ground. Right, that's when we click down the video frame. And well, you'll notice here, red car, blue car. So this was one that was not planned. I made the decision to quote this material because it worked for these other statements I wanted to make. And it just so happens that it's just another frame in Back to the Future that contains a red half and a blue half, and then what's happening in it? A collision, right? A crash. So it's a crash image. This car is sailing towards George. Yeah. I can't help myself. That's the lyric there. And then we cut to this image. Or maybe you don't know, but we're going to explain it all very shortly. So just bear with me a little bit during this introduction. This starts to form its own strange match. There's a man in here in a fedora. You can see that there. So once George is pushed out of the way, that was a North Tower carrying figure. He had the binoculars. Now this man comes in a fedora that's also paired with an antenna that connects with the blue side. And then now here we have Marty, because he's dressed in blue and red, can often exist on either side of these tableaus. In this case, he's going to be here on the explosion side, along with the red car, which, he's the kid. He's the atomic kid that's about to be hit by the vehicle in motion. So this comes together as a tremendous match, I believe, particularly because this is also happening here. We have red-handedness even on this element. So I find that quite amazing. That's really, if you draw a line right here, that's 3 elements per side. That's, there's a match there. Get to this. Right. And right when he hits his head, I want to cut to this weird number sequence. He hits his head and that kind of liquefies the thing around him. And now what we're going to see is this section of the Back to the Future painting, which I also believe constitutes a match. Here's the vehicle. We can't see it here, but there's twin red fire streaks down there on that side. And then also over here, there are telephone poles in the full painting. So that's also a clock. So that is matched, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful paintings of 9/11 to be painted before 9/11. And so what's happening now in the song is he's saying, I've been calling you from private numbers, or on private numbers, just to hear your voice, then I hang up. So here I wanted to somehow describe the early stages of this process, that sync might start pushing these numbers at you, maybe in connection with these movies, or just maybe on their own. So I'm just giving you some examples. 119. 131. I cut to 131 right when he says private, because 131 is a very special number to me. However, it also is a number that does appear in Back to the Future. This number appears multiple times, perhaps most spectacularly on the train. The train that they used to power the DeLorean at the end of Back to the Future Part 3. These are all numbers that I associate with 9/11 precog transmission, more or less. Here I do something that I'm quite proud of formally. I really am into this Adobe WaveWarp plugin. And I've really tried to go into it and make it my own a bit. So I really wanted to learn how to animate it to music, and so I'm sort of flexing that muscle a little bit here. Like, this is all kind of silly and unnecessary, but it adds a nice aesthetic gloss onto it, I think. We should watch it. We'll watch it at full speed. Sort of see how it snaps.
I've been calling you from private numbers. Just to
try to keep the
hear your voice, then I hang
numbers cutting, you know, on the snare there, for that clap. And then this is sort of visualizing the chord vibrations here on the frame. Picks it up again there. You know, I don't know. And then here we have another expanding frame, but picking up on what happened in the last sequence, we saw the frames get kind of very clearly liquefied there. And keeping this one in a kind of geloid sort of space. So again, just to sort of imply that we're getting a little dreamy here, I'm asking you to consider something quite bizarre now. This is two films juxtaposed on top of one another. Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. Incidentally, if you actually do this, if you just start those two films at more or less the same time and let them run on top of each other like this, very amazing alignments occur between them. It's a real great David Plate idea. Although I don't know that David has actually synced these two films. But anyway, I'd like to recommend that people do sync these two. I wonder if there's some great piece of music that would fit with it as well. But, so I like how this comes together here. We have the sun and the moon. These are elements from Prince of Darkness. 36th Street. It's funny. You know, the 3/6, we already saw that. We saw that in the Chromeo thing that opened Radical Rewind. So, again, these things are not planned, but here's an emergent, sort of doubled up 36 energy in this piece. We get this nice rectangle action here and all this. All these palm trees imply explosions. There's kind of it's like aspects of the match conceptually are floating around here a little bit. Here comes Neil, and he's got these dark circles under his eyes, so that's a Mr. N idea. And he also smokes a cigarette and so on. And anyway, In the Mouth of Madness is a movie about a horror novel that becomes real. And Prince of Darkness is a movie about a cylinder of green gas that carries the Antichrist and is related to the idea of precognitive video transmission. Yes, that's actually what Prince of Darkness is. So that's not me having a weird interpretation of it. That's just a very straightforward description of the basic plot of it. Prince of Darkness is providing essentially the background here, the palm trees and the sort of the summer scene. So that's another thing syncing to the lyrics here. He's saying, so damn hot, you're facing up, you're showing up the summer or something like that. So that could be a weird description of the explosion. And it's just various things, but it links in. We have a summer scene. It's kind of a matter to imply, because it was during the summer that I made this video, that I made Radical Rewind. Like, summer is happening outside, but I'm inside. I'm here like Sam Neill in The Mouth of Madness, and what I'm doing is I'm cutting video. So in this scene in The Mouth of Madness, Sam Neill is literally cutting books. He's cutting he's cutting the covers off of these books and then combining those covers to form a map that ends up directing him to a location where the author of these books has been hiding, except the location, it turns out, is actually like a portal into another dimension. So I'm combining these two ideas together, the green gas cylinder that summons the Antichrist at the end of time in the video transmission church, and the horror novel that becomes real when you combine the images on their covers in a way that makes a correspondence map that then transcends the laws of fantasy reality into one big composite idea. The point of this image, it's not just an aesthetic thing, it's to combine the major themes of these two films, Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness.
And I can't help myself.
It's also saying I can't help myself. We have this one face looking out towards the sun,
I can't.
and then Sam's face looking quite insanely, like inwardly, as if into the outward-facing sunny head. So this is a kind of moon and sun conjoined idea again.
Help myself.
And it also implies now that maybe it's one figure, John Trent, who's the Sam Neill character, and Brian, who's the character from from Prince of Darkness, that maybe these two are like one big character. So you see I've fused them into one big face here. And the one is cutting on the interior of the other. It's editing in there to create a picture. And what is the picture that the strange interior-facing mind is constructing? And so that's what I try to show you in the next
I got
film.
a one track.
I've got a one-track mind. And that's when I show you, the image of the two primary elements.
Mind.
That's the basic idea. So we're pulling back to reveal a projection space map of this image. I'm going to have to explain some weird sort of theoretical ideas here. We'll get to that in a second. I want to say that this is also where I introduced the gold frame for the first time. I use the gold frame to designate a divine image. Really, I think all images are divine. So there ought to be a gold frame around everything, and perhaps there is in some ultimate ontological sense. But there really ought to be a golden frame around this image. Put it that way. And then around the edges of the frame, I'm clustering projection space objects or elements. And so how does that work? Well, here's the very basic way that works. Right? I've already said that you can perceive this kind of double triangle shape in that wound, which is like the idea of sunglasses, which we see here. John Belushi is smoking a cigarette here, and this is a tower that's smoking. Then we have this antenna, which alternates white and black elements, and that's represented here by the black and white outfits, because they're the Blues Brothers, and they wear these funny suits. But then also have these fedora hats, which are kind of implied by the fact that this even has an antenna. It's like a big hat there. This almost looks like a belt. So it really, the idea of the suit gets locked in there, I would say, by that aspect of the image. And then also, my argument is that the color space of this image is defined by basically by blue up here and red and orange down here. There's also black and white and so on. So black and white and blue are strong aspects of this corner of the frame. And so that's why they're the Blues Brothers and why they have blues faces in this particular image that I grabbed of them. It's just to show you that this side of the image could remind you of this sort of image. That's basically it. It just might remind you of this. It's this kind of thing. Like, oh, look, there's a little smiling grandma here or something, It's like that, except much more structuralized, because these are very like defined aspects, I would say. So that's one way you might read this side of the image. You might read all these elements together as being a figure in a suit with glasses. It's maybe kind of black and white and blue and gray generally, and it has like a weird thing on its head, You might also just kind of ignore all that. You might just say, wow, there's like a big gaping thing here that has this kind of striated, it has this weird kind of toothed metal aspect to the bottom. So it really starts to look like maybe that's a mouth. And so one of the early, this is a zoom, and I'm cognizant of the fact that certain things are entering earlier than others. And so I tried to put kind of very primary associations like closer to the frame edges. So we see here that, maybe just a big mouth with kind of like teeth in need of dentistry might exist there. I have another kind of fedoraed person idea here in the neighborhood watch image. So taking a look here at the other side, my argument is that the dog, which basically these are the shapes that make up the dog. There's the eyes, here's the nose, here's the mouth, here's the weird kind of like muzzle mouth thing. Here's this kind of like floppy ear, another like floppy ear, and then like just kind of like this texture. That's all contained there, I think, pretty clearly. There's a weird dog nose, there's this weird dog mouth, this weird shape. This kind of starts to look like a floppy ear. There are other things here that imply kind of floppy ear shapes and so on. It's very close, I would say. And so, what is that? Look, I know, obviously, this is an image of an explosion, and this is just some weird thing you can see in it. And at this point, I suppose very many rationalizations and objections could be raised. You could say, well, what about this thing? Why aren't you concentrating on the weird, like, bird face that exists over here? And I would say, well, because it's obviously a very minor element, and these lines are just much more defined in the image. Like, I can't look at this and not see this face. It jumps out at me as this weird, deranged face. And so I think that is a strong aspect of the projection space by way of its sort of weight of the centroid there. A lot of objective image structure comes together in a way that can imply a dog. So I think almost anybody would see a dog there, or some kind of strange, weird faced animal thing, at least subliminally. They might not be, like, if you're not looking at the image in that way, you're not going to see that kind of stuff. You'd have to already be looking at this image as if it were a piece of art worthy of analysis. And so that's why I've placed it in the gold frames also. Another thing this side could be is a rose. So there's my rose. And so on for all the other objects. And so as we pull out, you'll see that I have a pretty large map here. One thing I think the image might be is this could be an animal being slaughtered, because there's a defined kind of neck line there, and then all this debris coming out the bottom. So I think it's quite close to this idea of a sort of blood flowing out of an animal that's having its head cut off. It's interesting because it relates to the idea of sacrifice, and of course many people are dying here in this image. That's a very terrible aspect of, are we laughing or crying here? What are we doing? Terrible sort of idea, but I also think it could just be like kind of a big red car is an idea that hovers there. Messy food of kind of red, yellow, cooked meat sort of variety. Like pizza might sit there. I don't put a pizza there. I put a burger there. But the point is, you should get the idea. This is not an exhaustive list. This is an example. The projection space cannot be mapped out completely. It's not a possible thing to do with it. But you can try to represent sort of the whole of the space in a low resolution way. So I'm trying to suggest both the width and the depth of it here. That, there are many different things, types of things. It's not like we're all dealing with people and animals. The North Tower could just be a big syringe that maps onto the structure, very accurately. It could be some kind of strange clock radio, with this kind of banded action on it. It could be just a big blue clock because this is an ambiguous shape. You can read it like this, but it's also valid to read it like this. And if you read it like that, then it starts to look like a clock tower, you see. Pans and radio antennas and so on. This is even a little bit of a cheat because satellite dishes of this sort do actually appear in the image. More big Humphrey Bogart ideas. It's the lightning side and the sunglasses side and all of this, also the bow tie side. I tried to construct this map in such a way that it would make the subsequent image puzzles easy. So if you study this projection space map and then try to see what's taking place in these images that I then show you, you should be able to read back to this map and understand the point correspondence. Okay, I feel like I'm not doing a good job of actually explaining what this is, though. If there's an image that can be seen to fit on top of another image, as it were, in a way that forms enough point correspondence, what do we have to think that this might be a dog? We have to have an eye, we have to have another eye, and those two have to be in the right place in relation to each other. We have to have a nose, to have a mouth. All of those have to be posed correctly relative to each other. We have to have the edge of the head. Probably the color is somewhat important and the implied size of the body, because otherwise this could be a face of all sorts of things. But this really makes it look like a little stumpy dog creature. So that's a lot that, not just anything is going to fit there. I cannot really put a giraffe in there. It doesn't work. It kind of works. And if I were to see a giraffe in a match that had many other high-dimensional aspects, so it's like just another weird animal, okay, you might accept it. It depends on the global image calculation. But the dog seems quite primary. I just see the dog, little dogs like this, little golden dogs or things, in so many of these matches. I also see goldfish, and there are many things that fit there in a high-dimensional way. But that's the point. It seems to be the projection space is the secret image, which the unconscious recognizes, but the conscious doesn't. And in fact, it's not a single image, but a multiplicity of images. And the unconscious sees all of these things, because it doesn't know exactly what's relevant information yet or not. It's going to make some decisions and present a kind of simplified view of this to your ego. So your ego is just going to look at this picture, and it's just going to think it's a picture of this event. I know what this is. This is a picture of 9/11. But unconsciously, you don't know what you're looking at. You're just looking at an image, and your brain is trying to figure out what is this image. And so it's running all kinds of dense calculus on this image, and it's noticing all kinds of things about it. I think it's noticing really subtle things about it. To give you an example of how this intuition might work, the other day I was in the grocery store. And I went to the grocery store and I got a lot of different groceries. And each time you get a grocery, you're getting something that costs, $5, $10, $2.95, etc. Just random prices. And if you're a frugal person, you're going to be kind of looking at different brands and comparing these different prices. But I don't do that. I just buy what I want to eat. And so I'm really not paying attention to the prices consciously. Sometimes on an occasional item, I'm like, okay, how expensive is this like trash candy bar I'm considering buying? Like I might look at it, but generally I don't. And then you get up to the register and it's going to be a surprise. Your total is going to be a surprise. And lately I am very good at predicting what that total is going to be. The other day I got up there and I said, I think that's going to be $30. And boy, if it wasn't $30 and 56 cents or something, it was exactly $30. I don't think that was a lucky guess. I think that my unconscious was paying attention to all of those values. That was information that was probably in the visual field. I probably did see the price tags as I grabbed things and put them in the basket. And the unconscious has a memory, of course. It knows it's seen all this information before. I buy similar things. And so it knew, and it sent me up, it sent me a blast of the intuition tunnel. It just said $30, and it just popped into my head, and it was correct. And so the unconscious is seeing things in this image that you're not seeing. And one of the things it's seeing is Mr. N. I'm just telling you pretty matter-of-factly that your brain is perceiving Mr. N when it looks at this image. It just is. There's no way for your brain not to see this weird figure in the hat with glasses, because this is a very archetypal image. This is a shadow figure. He appears in dreams. So he's in your brain already. And all your unconscious is doing when it sees this image is it's noticing that maybe someone drew an archetypal picture here, which is like a religious sort of picture. So it's seeing a religious figure here. And anyway, because this is an image of the Twin Towers, which people related to, I believe, in real life, unconsciously, as a divine pair, it was like the divine pair that sat at the center of the city, in the middle of the mandala, and that people used to organize themselves, like actually not to organize, but to orient themselves in the city. Look up, where's the Twin Towers relative to me? Okay, now I know where I am, right? And then it just so happens that this image, and this is something very strange I can't explain, but this particular image receives structure in this particular way that makes it interpretable in these particular symbolic ways. So like I said, the projection space is a little open. There are many implicit pictures that your brain might guess that this is an image of before it settles on this is an image of the Twin Towers in Manhattan being struck by planes in this historical event that we all know about. Before your brain knows that, it's doing some kind of layered image analysis. That's just actually what your unconscious mind is doing. It's doing implicitly the kinds of things we do on this channel explicitly. It's looking at, okay, here's shapes. We have rectangles. Your brain at some level has to be detecting, here's a rectangle, and that means that this could be a building. And well, here's these two rectangles right next to each other with these other things in line and these particular, so I know, it's comparing it back against, at whatever level of analysis, it's comparing back towards models and its memory of these things and all this different stuff. And then it says, okay, I know what that is. That's the Twin Towers specifically. This is this building in Manhattan and so on. But before you get to that level, where it's doing all this fancy comparative stuff, you still just have some rectangles and some weird abstract things happening to those rectangles. And I think it's from there that we start to get some of these odd projection space reads. And well, so here's the next part of my claim, which is, I'm sorry, this is so disorganized. There is no real easy elevator pitch way, I think, to describe my practice these days. But it is precisely not the visual image, the literal image, that was transmitted backwards through time. In fact, in some instances, we do get the literal image transmitted backwards in time. There are instances of that, but usually it's not the visual image, the literal image. It's the invisible image. It's the projection space that was transmitted backwards. But here's the rub. Projection space elements were transmitted complete in situ on the XY plane. So we don't just get in these films these sorts of objects clustering together. They cluster together on their correct sides. And even more than that, they sometimes really, really track the positioning of the major elements of that scene. The objects, in other words, the dog doesn't appear over here. The dog appears right there. Relative to the frame. Relative to the frame. So, I'm giving you a clue here about how to play my video. That also relates to how to interpret the end of the video. So when we get there, we'll get there. But I'm bringing in this meme, the deal with it glasses. And they're going to descend over the North Tower. Got a one-track mind and it's all on you. So those come down and land there. I just told it to you explicitly. But my idea was this was kind of almost like make something that aliens could read, just on the basis of the pictures. Because that's how the unconscious seems to express itself. It's this alien picture mind. So I wanted to make sure that just with the image, you could understand that, okay, over here we have glasses, sunglasses. And there's, there's sunglasses on the Blues Brothers and all of this. but I give you explicit glasses, and I give you a lot of them there to kind of highlight and say, hey, remember this. Think about the sunglasses idea over here. And then I place sunglasses here, and I match them over their correct shape. So that might give you the idea of like, oh, okay, right. And then the baseball bat, that would go over the antenna. This is not something I had in the beginning, you understand. Creating this map took many years and quite a bit of suffering and sleepless nights and so on. To learn to see this was quite a thing. And so then that's the other meaning. See it, perceive it, and then deal with it. Precisely deal with it. Okay, next sequence. We move into our first sort of run of matches. And so we're moving into a section of the film now where I am sort of asking the viewer to correlate the next bunch of gold frames with this first gold frame, and to do it via these objects. So I'm asking you to connect these film images to this image, but to do it through its projection mapping. I'm asking you to perceive that with your frames, with your spectacles. My convention is usually to wait to draw the bisecting line until the end. But because we know that these are matches, because I've already placed them in their gold frames, we'll open with the bisecting line. So this is going to define the two clustering groups. This image divides almost just perfectly down the middle like this. Let's begin with the North Tower side. I'm also giving you an extra clue up here, right, to remember this color notion. That we have kind of blue clustering up here and yellow or red tones down here. This image falls that way. Incidentally, this first image violates that a little bit by putting Marty's blue color over here. So you've got to already be a little sophisticated about how you're understanding what's going on here. But so here's how I would describe it. This kind of gets both the notion of the fedora hat and the tower, and then that's a clock. So there's a little clock tower there. Now, this may be deliberate subliminal information placed in the ground by Zemeckis. Zemeckis might be foreshadowing the clock tower sequence that occurs later in the film. I often think that the way the skateboard looks here highlights the how to say, it looks very similar to the DeLorean on fire. We'll get to this element. So that could be going on, but it also works as a match in a very strange way. We have multiple clocks. Here we have a clock made out of white and black elements, kind of a twin-pillared sign and with some kind of a thing on top of it. No, I suppose that's another clock. A lot of vertical energy over here. Another big clock, and this one is actually set to 8, 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 818 appears here. It also has the effect of like picking out the 9, more or less. The 8s are B, visor, spectacles, frames, North Tower, Mr. N, witnessing ideas. Notice there's very little going on down here in this image, just this kind of gray. I usually draw these in white when it's showable. That's a cluster, you see. There's a center of organization there. That's simply too many clocks and vertical elements and things bunched up together in the image. That weirds me out. Well, it's okay. It's a movie. It's a composition. It's a piece of art, but what's exactly going on in this piece of art? So anyway, over here, we have now the skateboard that's been kind of formed in this aerodynamic way, resembles kind of like a flaming top. It's a rolling thing, and Marty kicks it and it moves in this direction. But at the start of the image, it begins here. It combines with dog food, which is a textural match for the South Tower explosion, right? That basic it's actually a textural and a little bit of a shape match. All of this sort of stuff captures the feeling of an explosion. And then the fact that there's kind of debris along the bottom has the feeling of those sort of ejections from the atomic kid. There's also actually an image of a literal dog here, right? That's more dog food or something. And then, of course, Marty. To me, these become like the two rectangles. We often see those represented somehow. One way is might be the two rectangles. Another way to think about it is it might be legs, which I think do I show legs in the projection map in Radical Rewind? I think I show sex happening at least. Next. So this stuff, I'm alternating black and white back here as the eye class. And that's kind of meant to evoke the idea of kind of, am I seeing it or am I not? Because there is always a little bit of this quality with this, a bit of a magic eye effect. And also to thematize the idea already of the pleroma, the boundless space of potential that might exist beyond the frame, as it were. Well, here we go right into another one. Take it there or there. It's a little hard to decide here. I think I always want to cut kind of here-ish in this image, which anyway is already kind of implied by this shape. Well, the obvious red energy over here, red guitar, red shirt, drums, which is explosive percussive idea. Then we have Marty in blue and head to toe this time. And then also with this kind of alternating grid pattern on his shirt, standing with a strong vertical microphone, another big vertical microphone, and stairs. And another person in a blue shirt. And then if you look just at this element, there's a very compelling fractal placement here, with the red on this side. And the blue on this side. Yeah. So that's how that one works. I don't know what sort of how helpful it is to narrate this stuff. Might be more helpful to just draw. Also, I'm realizing, yeah, this is going to take a really long time, isn't it? Maybe it's not necessary to go through and demonstrate how every single one of these images works. That kind of ruins the puzzle anyway. For this one, I'll just give you a little hint, which is that it's not always about objects that are facing the camera. They don't have to be literally visible to be visible by reference. And so in this case, I'll give more than a hint to tell you what I mean. I'm talking about the stop sign here. That stop sign is a major red element appearing right next to this pillar, which also has the word Mary written in red. On this side, we have Bob written in blue. There's Marty on his flaming skateboard with his red backpack on this side. Over here we have all the blue N ideas, including the tall pole and all this stuff. So I'm just going to let this run now. You notice here I'm also using in the background a little bit of sort of VHS static on these cuts. That's just a little touch, but I love those things. Little touches that give the piece a rhythm and a feel. This was the image that I was talking about on the podcast today. That would be the Always Record Halloween Special 2019 up on thesyncbook.com. Spent a good deal of time talking about the ways this image comes together as a match. Excuse me. I'm recovering from being sick and also mending a slightly broken heart. Man, dating sucks. So, TV in the foreground, this is just the strangest picture. Some of these I just have to point things out because they're so amazing to me, and I think they go by fast enough in the video that people don't really grok to it. But this is a paper airplane. There's like a paper airplane sailing through this frame, and it passes right behind Marty's head, and it just perfectly intersects this like red coat arm over here. Again, in the location, in the correct location, i.e. diagonally in relation to our North Tower resonator here. This kind of ought to have been the climax image of this sequence, of course. This is a really famous tableau. But I wanted to imply a little narrative, and also it's not the last image in Back to the Future, and I kind of wanted them to go more or less in the order they appear in the films, So now we get this Bank of America. That works as a match. The longer you look at that one, the more it works. It's a very strange one. And then the kiss, of course, at the end. Which kind of ties it back into this, into the love song, or is it more of a sex song? But, whatever this weird Chromeo song is. So now we're back to Hellraiser, right? So I opened with Hellraiser in the intro logo. And now we're back in Hellraiser 3, looking at just one of the most incredible matches. I'm just going to mark it up ambiently, sort of as we talk about it. This is a very important scene in Hellraiser 3, but it's also one that just connects very nicely to the rest of the material in Radical Rewind, because sorry, it involves all these. There's a book there. Not sure what that is. Relates to the stuff already, because this is another scene taking place in a video editing room. We were looking at Sam Neill from Prince of Darkness cutting up books. Now we're going to look at this character from Hellraiser 3 cutting video. So I'm obviously talking about myself here in some way. The process of looking at these matches. It says, "Don't believe your friends, I'm not a creep." And we cut right into more of this joystick stuff, That's something that I think is present in the film, Hickox, the director, is using this joystick to imply some lechery on this character. So I thought I would just sort of bring that in to talk about myself, don't believe your friends, I'm not a creep. As in, I know this all seems a little crazy, maybe I'm a nutcase, but the only thing creepy about me are the conventionally creepy things about human beings, I've got my sexual fixations, and I've got my unhealthy, relationships with screens, we all do. I'm overly attached to my phone to give me, validation boosts and things. Social media is a terrible thing, and all this stuff, And so I just think the sort of the metaphor of, masturbating with a screen in this context is, I don't know. It worked anyway, and I went with it. I just love this image too, that it says sync, self, and key fill, and it's arrow pointed to the self. Because it also then is talking about the alchemical idea. Masturbation is a self, what am I trying to say here, auto response, or self-reflexive sort of process. The idea of combining watching a movie with a normal movie with the idea of masturbating. That metaphor wouldn't work with pornography, right? But the idea is this guy's just editing some video, but then there's kind of this implied masturbation with the joystick. It kind of potentially suggests that the act of watching a film might be a kind of masturbation, symbolically, i.e. in an alchemical sense. A kind of literal self-absorption as the reflections of your psychic contents fill the display. And perhaps as the contents of other sorts of things, perhaps descending from the future, fill the display. So, the moment that you tell me I'm allowed to, Ellie goes in and turns off the TV. It's this kind of notion you shouldn't be doing that behavior. Turn that off. And then it's just, the moment that you tell me I'm allowed to, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to take you out. I run it backwards now. So it's like, we're not turning it off. We're going to turn that image back on and look at it again. Then as that happens, the frame is receding again. And to make it clear that we're rewinding that footage, I put the rewind streaks there. As that pulls out, I'm fading in sparks in the background that then also fades into a Prince of Darkness image. So that's the green cylinder from Prince of Darkness. Lisa and is it Katie? I don't remember the names of the characters in that movie at the moment. They're already possessed by the Antichrist, whatever it is, and they're about to unleash the cylinder. So again, it's playing off the lyrics. I'm going to pick you up and take you out. Well, Chromeo song is talking about a date, but here they're picking up the cylinder that contains the psychedelic gas and releasing that. So it is rather a cannabis idea. It is meant to suggest watch these movies stoned and you might notice some different things in them. But it's also meant to suggest the idea that the viewing of the film itself is like the unleashing of a psychedelic drug, potentially. It's not necessarily about the inclusion of a literal psychedelic drug. We're hearing, here I'll play it back at normal speed. We hear here, maybe we'll go back and do it later or something. We hear the rewind streaks. And I think that by hearing that kind of backward sound, when your brain sees these sparks, it starts to imagine that they're kind of coming off of a saw blade. So that metaphor of cutting, but, we opened the film with Sam cutting images with scissors, and then kind of that extends into the metaphor of the projection space map that looks like I've cut out lots of little objects and sort of placed them onto this XY grid. And then the metaphor with cutting video via editing, but now we've escalated to a chainsaw. So now we're going to do some heavy cuts, right? Cuts that might invert the flow of time, possibly. Because I was a little sneaky about how I revealed this scene. Because those of you who are familiar with Hellraiser 3 or familiar with my analysis of it, know that this shot is immediately preceded in the actual kind of like film timeline by a literal shot of the Twin Towers. So I rewind us into that now. Right? That's not my edit. This actually sits in sequence with that other shot. So it goes Twin Towers and then that image on the TV. So we just rewind it into the image of the twins. And now I think the rewind sounds start to sound like ghosts wailing, and the streaks from the sparks start to look like snow descending, because we're kind of moving into a like winter Times Square scene here almost, That starts to look like snow falling on Times Square, which, and by the way, we're still just rewinding through the Hellraiser. This is the image that precedes the twins. And this, of course, constitutes another match, because the blue Pepsi can is on this side, the red Pepsi can is on this side, and then this animation on this ad, we see them fall. This is just so weird, me talking about my art. I bet a lot of this doesn't really make sense to anybody, but I'm enjoying it anyway. I hope some people are finding some of this interesting. Now we cut into the Four Eyes sequence. That's a big pun, unintentional, but it worked out really nice. I didn't realize that till later, editing Moonwalker. Four Eyes. It's another spectacles idea. Also like the Four Horsemen, so maybe it's implying like, there's an apocalypse coming. And so now we're looking at 4 gold frames at once, because now I want to show you that this is not just something that happens in Back to the Future and maybe Hellraiser, some of the other weird things we've looked at so far in the video. But that the really impressive thing is to see these properties cluster across multiple films simultaneously. And so, again, I'll leave it up to viewers to understand these correspondences, or if you want to dive really deep into the thing, I've already cut a ton of video looking at all 4 of these movies. So this is Freaked. This is Mac and Me. This is that's Hellraiser 3. Whoops, Hellraiser F. And this is Gremlins 2. And it stays that way through the course of this sequence. We're just getting, a bunch of different images from Gremlins here, a bunch of different images from Mac and Me here, etc. Actually, I do want to emphasize this one, because I quite like this one. I like this because Forrester in Gremlins is gesturing towards a painting that shows a structural map of the 9/11 image. Because it's just a big blue rectangle and then this red thing down here diagonally, so that tracks. And so that's a painting that shows the abstract structure of the image, but then this is a painting that also shows the abstract structure. Here we have the rectangles and the red element here. But it also this one is showing you symbolic things. This is like a figure touching a sink, about to flush a pack of cigarettes down the toilet. So there's like many weird associations there. And then, I guess I won't talk about these ones so much, but similarly with these other ones. And so on. Someday this will all be understood. I know that makes me sound pretty strange, saying things like that, but it just will be. So here I wanted to imply a zebra idea. Zebra like PKD. Zebra was a kind of divine intelligence that mined things. So it's about structure copies. So here I'm introducing a new primary color in the video. Of course, in our analysis, this has already been around because this has become the color of rewind vision to me, I guess. It's a very atomic color. And it worked out nicely here. It appears here nicely with this green-orange gremlin bride atomic kid idea. So for those of you who don't know, this was a phrase popular in the 90s because we had to rewind videotapes back then, and these were stickers that looked like this. They placed on VHS tapes. It's zooming in here as this big circle over this 4 structures. This becomes a big mandala now. And now we move into the section where I try to show the fact that this structure really seems to come out strongly on the posters to many of these films. I'm not going to talk about the atomic kid idea and all this stuff. This is too complicated for me today. But, we see how this is working. I think actually Mickey Rooney up here ought to be kind of over there. So the drawing of the dividing line, this is like a kind of significant action to me. In the context of the piece, it becomes the one track. That's the one track that divides the tube, which is also then the hemispheres. So one track mind is the brain with the corpus callosum riding down the center, which then also maps onto the Twin Towers. So the structure here is I show you 2 posters, right? We looked at the Atomic Kid and King Kong. And so I show you those, we mark them up and show how they bisect. And then I show you other matching material from those movies. So now we're looking at the Atomic Kid. And this is just a scene in the Atomic Kid where these 2 characters have matching red hair. It's a black and white movie, but we just know that these actors are redheads. So it's redheads kissing, and then these 2 tower-like things which explode right away. And then, again, this is not me editing. Maybe I edited it for rhythm to make it faster or something. But then the film cuts into 2 more pillar things and a fireplace that then ignite. Okay, and now we're in King Kong. This is a shot in King Kong where a helicopter crashes into the World Trade Center. And now 2 more posters. So there's Indiana becoming a 9/11 idea. Here's Bruce becoming a 9/11 idea. And again, now we're in those movies. The truth is, Temple of Doom, as far as I've determined, doesn't have a lot of high-precision structural matches in it. But this one I do think kind of works. Got all the red over here, and the collie mouth, and the skull mouths and things over here. Vertical elements and so on. Its horns. Here's just to show sort of the idea that, however, like a big image in this movie is just this guy in a fedora with a little kid always at his side. So that becomes kind of a tower pair. Now we're in Die Hard. These are glyphs that appear on the bomb. Blows up the building. Now we're looking at the tower explosion from Die Hard. Bill and Ted get marked up. Now we see the towers land and Bill and Ted. By the way, the motion here is, there's something like wiping a screen clean. Wiping glasses clean, right? We move from, it's like, so here's like static, like unclarity or something, and then we wipe down that green line, and it kind of literally wipes the static away. And we get clarity, and then it reveals the true image behind that image. That was kind of the idea there. Also playing with the idea of transmission again. So I contain in here what you would need to maybe understand that the K in the title was a reference to the Circle K and all this. But yeah, man, every time I look at these blue sort of tower of lights descending from heaven at the Circle K idea, I'm looking at it. So weird. And, well, okay, so this was a high-dimensional match. I'm not going to bother to go into it, but the point of this high-dimensional match is that it also contains in it the fucking King Kong poster. So we've established now a very weird circle. These big double red Ks on them. And I jump off the back of that little visual circle that I established to move into a loop that exists in Zemeckis' film. So now we're dealing with the the terrorists crashing into the Fox Photo film booth that Marty witnesses twice, once at the beginning of the film, once at the end. The clock tower being struck. The terrorists driving, because remember, these kind of happen at more or less the same time when you stitch up the non-local breaks, as it were, in the film. The clock tower is struck by lightning, which then sends Marty back to the future at just the right time to catch up with this and view it. So they're kind of synchronized in Marty's space. The clock tower strike, and the terrorists, the Libyan terrorists, crashing their van over the fiery 11 streaks into the twin foxes. So then they show that. We show this weird flaming pyramid idea. Doc and Marty form for a second. They turn around, and then I wanted to show the numeroglyphs on Doc's clocks. 119s. Doc gets electrocuted. That's to imply this feeling you can have sometimes when something sinks very profoundly. Now we move into this section where I don't know what to say about this section, except that it was a very profound section that resulted in a very profound real-world synchronicity. Here I have my dancing foxes. So I'm trying to kind of draw out what I think the symbolic implication is of that last sequence. This stuff from Back to the Future, focus on the foxes. Focus on the fact that we have terrorists crashing a vehicle into twin red foxes. Maybe that's a significant structure in this film. That's a weird thing to see. So I'm trying to tell you that those twin flames, those twin flaming foxes, are related to the twins. It's another way of expressing the twins. Now this is not a blue and a red pair. It's just a double red pair. You might say, well, why should that exist? And I would say, I have no fucking idea. It just seems to be that a pair of red, that this is a very basic way to express 9/11. Two things on fire. So that becomes twin foxes. I've placed the image explicitly on the hemispheres and then tried to make it into kind of a dance party thing. And then the lyrics are saying, you might think I'm crazy, but I'm crazy about you. So, about this image. There's a couple other things going on here. There's Space Odyssey 2001 Stargate sequence running in reverse here. So it's like it's kind of getting sucked into the center of the brain. That's very subtle in the background, just accounting for these streaks. And then I also have a 3D rendition of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life rotating around here kind of very faintly. You can see some of the sephiroth. This is alternating this sort of diagonal thing. Here it says resource science or something. I'm not sure. I like using clip art and then just leaving the watermarks in there. For some reason that really pleases me. And in general, you can see here, like I haven't gone in and cleaned up the edges on these guys or anything. Like I've left it a very internet idea, because also I want it to be clear that I'm borrowing all these elements. I didn't make any of these things. This is all pure collage form. Like I said, that's Kubrick, that's 9/11. Here's some like 4th of July, like fireworks, like stock footage. And the foxes, I actually don't remember. I just found them on YouTube somewhere. Some YouTuber made a, if you search for dancing foxes, twin foxes, something, you'll probably find the original. It's just so great. I've used it in a few videos. I also used it in Anima Problems. Yeah, I love it, and it works perfectly here. Well, so here's the source of the big synchronicity around this for me, is that after I made this image that overlaid the Red Twins and 9/11 and fireworks, the day before 4th of July, which is when the fireworks explosion was, where I was living in Butte, we watched the fireworks, and at the end of the display there was a fireball. So an actual, like, unplanned, accidental fireball, a giant fiery explosion ignited at the end of this fireworks display. That was like one day after I had completed and uploaded this video, right? Is that true? If we bridge into, yep, there it is, July 3rd. So it was that. So actually, it was that night when they had the fireworks display, the night of the 3rd. I know it's not the case everywhere, but where I was living it was. And this was the last sequence I finished on this video because it was the most emotionally difficult to make. It's hard for me to look at the 9/11 image and put kind of ridiculous things on top of it like this and all this. Like, I feel compelled to do it. I also feel weird about doing it. And to me, this is a kind of a crazy picture. That's why I put it in the crazy, like, you might think I'm crazy, but I'm crazy about you space. And it's like, yeah, it's like 9/11, but it was a big fireworks display, like a big dance show on some level, because it was all the souls dancing as they went back in time to create all this art for us and these secret pictures. And then, sorry, I'm just trying to narrate, like what actually goes on in my head sometimes. And then it's like, okay, when I was making this section, I was like, oh, it works so nicely because it's like the fireworks, it's like the souls, they're like watching the souls, like leaving the image. It becomes so poignant, we didn't see the souls there, and that's an error, so I added them back, I did something helpful for the dead, and that made me feel really good. And then that night, to just see this overlaid in real life, a fireworks display and a fireball, just material, like a big, scary fireball. Because, a display malfunctioned. It was supposed to set up fireworks, but it just blew up somehow and made this thing. Nobody was injured, everybody was fine, but it was, it was the feeling of having summoned an image with libido. I concentrated on this so much, and then, or something. I don't mean to imply that it's causative in that way. I actually don't think it is. But that was the subjective feeling, which then made me feel very crazy. So it was a nice meta moment here. Radical Rewind succeeded in playing a trick on me. Now Heki shows up to ignite the twins. Now we're in, again, I'm keeping the Kubrick footage running here. Now it's running into Ghostbusters. And this kind of like the four horsemen at the end of time confronting the Androgyne or something kind of idea at the top of the tower. Because Gozer sits back there in her pyramid. She's a Hecate type, I think. So it links with the previous image. You'll notice this green is still around. We introduced that in the middle with the big Be Kind Rewind thing. And then kept doing it with the dividing lines down the middle. And now that color's still around. And so here it comes down sort of dragged into place almost as if to say, here's a foundation. The Wizard of Oz. And you can see how there are matchy elements here already, just in the cover. So on. So this is now just a series of films that I think contain mini copies of the 9/11 image. Not every one of these posters works as a match, but the images all contain, or the films all contain matches. There's the honeymooners from that, as quoted in Back to the Future. You note that the movie posters are semi-transparent now. Maybe that's significant. What are the lyrics here? I don't quite remember. Oh yeah, and so it's going, and my friends, they don't get it. My friends, they don't get it. They say I'm obsessed. Yeah, he says, but I'm upset, and I won't settle for nothing less than your caress. So, I don't know how to say what I mean by quoting that there in that way. I mean, obviously you get the first part. My friends think I'm a nutso. They don't understand that these movies contain God's magic pictures yet. Most of them. Some of my friends understand that. I won't settle for nothing less than your caress. When he says caress, I put in the sound of a knife slice. We're approaching Gozer, who is a Kali type, and Kali cuts off your head, so it's an ego death reference here. My friends say they don't get it. They say I'm obsessed, but I'm just upset. I have a problem. These images are bothering me, and I won't settle until I get to the bottom of them, until I understand them. And so that's the situation that I was in for a number of years. I didn't know yet what was going on, and my friends thought I was losing my mind, and my girlfriend thought I was losing my mind. And I was, in a way, losing my mind. But I also learned how to see something important. And I still think that's true. And so I made this movie about it. And this movie, by the way, Quetzalcoatl is, or it's just called Q, I guess. But anyway, this movie is nutso. Everyone should watch it. So here comes this line. And I won't settle for nothing less than your caress. And we'll hear the slice, and then we'll see two columns shoot up over here. Also, I want to say, I really like how this works as a sequence of text. People of Earth, your planet is about to be destroyed. We're terribly sorry for the inconvenience. Terror vision. It kind of ends up giving you like a bunch of sentences that almost describe an idea in the end. When you've got critters, you need all the help you can get. Like, it's, critters are like unconscious complexes, maybe, in all of this. They live underground and so on. So here's where we're bridging into I won't settle for nothing less than your caress. And at this point, we cut to Inner Space. Very weird movie. There's an adventure of incredible proportions. I invert the flow of the Kubrick stuff and also put it under a wave warp. So the time is scrolling backwards out here now. If people notice that. That's an effect you feel more than you see consciously at normal speed. And then while that's happening, I have this video of the running fox. And he's in a video card that's moving from right to left, which implies backwards motion, according to Gestalt psychological theory. When you make a film, if someone walks into a room this way, your brain interprets that as someone moving forward towards the goal. If someone walks into a room, relative to the frame this way, you interpret it as them going backwards towards something. So that's why in video games, side-scrollers always move in this direction. It feels very weird to have a side-scroller that moves in the other direction. So I'm capitalizing on that here to imply another backwards thing. Backwards happens in the motion out here, and then backwards happens here with the fox. But the fox is not moving backwards. The fox itself is running forwards. It's just that his frame is traveling backwards through time. Cuts across here as this warps into this rewind thing, and it shows us Prince of Darkness, which, again, it says a bunch of stuff about something being unleashed after centuries, and it's like this sort of like cannabis, like idea, like brain, like shooting up to like a little crucifix up there. It's a very weird poster. It does work as an inverted 9/11 match, by the way. Frantic by Harrison Ford. You know, that one is a very strange one. Also, it was, you know, it's a strange film. Here, this is an element I'm bringing in from Scanners. And I don't know a lot about Scanners. I'm really just quoting it because it's a Mr. N idea, and because the head explodes, and I needed some gore to accentuate the slice sound that I put when they say caress in the songs. That happens right here. Right? We hear that slice and we see all this blood go up. And then we get Mac and Me as the as the central aspect of that story. And these are just a bunch of quotes that appear in other films that seem to resonate the 9/11 image, either in isolation or in an aggregative way. Let's see how this works. This image, this image, this image, this image, and this image are all from E.T. So we're looking at Mac and Me, which is an E.T. kind of knockoff. And so here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 video quotes that Spielberg makes in E.T. These ones work as matches, each in their own right. Maybe we'll kind of do them really quickly here. You know, here's the two towers. This one is red. This one has smoke. Here's Tom holding a cigarette. He's a cat with this kind of black-white, you know, he's kind of a Mr. N idea, just in the design, like the way his mouth and eyes work. And then his ass is on fire. So this whole thing works as a very nicely bisected match. Similarly, here we have the parent dressed in blue on the phone, this kind of structure in the background, and so on. And then we have the child in red holding a red boat in the air. He's playing with a boat as if it's a plane. So that bisects nicely. And then here we have, I believe this is, right, this is a woman in red, and this is a man in a hat and a raincoat. I forget what the film is that this is from. It's the same place we get this quote from, which is the same redheaded lady looking in a mirror. So you see we get and being horrified. So we get a kind of shocked double twin reveal there. Meanwhile, on this side, I stuck the last kind of E.T. image up here because it gives us a nice red B, which then allows me to show you that this whole column I've constructed for you kind of works as a match. Over here, this is a big Mr. N column. So we get a lot of, Mr. N ideas here strongly. Then over here, it's all in black and white and so on, black and white images. And then over here, we have all the color images, and it's really emphasizing the fire and the redhead and stuff. N elements appear in here, because these are self-contained matches. And S elements appear over here, because some of these are also self-contained matches. But then I wanted to arrange them globally to work as a giant, sort of artificial match of my making by gluing all of the elements into a big pair of pillars. So there you go for everything going on there. This is an image of Indiana running away from a plane following him in between two pillars with a very pronounced Mr. N father idea here. We have like multiple Mr. N things here, but this image is a quotation in The Mouth of Madness. John Trent watches this on the TV in the hotel that he stays in. And so this is actually, a John Carpenter quote of a much older movie called, is it just called Space Monsters? I don't remember. I'll have to look it up and throw it in later. This is the Honeymooners episode, that Back to the Future quotes. And then this is a video quote that appears in the Medusa Touch, total Mr. N and Atomic Kid idea. Color space isn't right, it's an inversion and so on, but kind of an early entry in the constellation. Was it 77 or 78? Maybe, I don't remember. Was it earlier? I don't remember. But anyway, this is quoted in that film in a very weird space. There's like a suicide that takes place there. This woman jumps out of the window, and then her jumping out of the window synchronizes with this animal falling on the screen, and the director takes the time to show us that, so it's it's already situated in a synchronicity involving a disaster. It's like a suicide, and if you think about the 9/11 photo, that's like a suicide photo. It's a suicide bombing, so that's a very strange one, and it seemed appropriate to place it there on the foundation. I don't know why I placed that one on the bottom, but I did. He's come from the past to destroy the future. We told you, remember the rules, you didn't listen. Here's where I think the text really starts to pick up. You see how here we get baskets and bandits and things. This is strange. Judgment Day. It's nothing personal. What started in hell will end on earth. Freaked. The funniest film in years. God, I love this one. This ain't no game. And so then at this point I start to bring down the descending green glasses, which is going to turn you into some kind of Mr. N. You're going to receive the frame now. There's a perspective shift here that also implies that you're on a track, that this is a ride, or kind of amusement park ride. We're going to pass through a gate and arrive at this weird movie portal thing going on. We have In the Mouth of Madness, lived any good books lately. As that happens, these glasses are going to come down over your head with a red side and a blue side that are going to catch 2 red candles and ignite them with the power of, like, I don't know, sync perspective. I timed that so that it occurs right with Johnny Depp seeing flames in his glasses and smoking a cigarette, which does rather bring in the idea of these as some kind of cannabis vision, I suppose. It doesn't have to be with drugs. This is just to diagnose newness in the end. This green means a new and maybe somewhat foolish-seeming perspective. However you get there, try it on, and then perceive perceive how these films divide this way and reveal this symbol. Ghosts of Mars, the ghosts of history. Okay, this to me is an attempt to show the secret image that is most primary in the 9/11 image. I think when most people, Westerners at least, let's say, looked at that image, they perceived unconsciously an image of the Holy Family. The atomic kid explosion, the South Tower explosion, that becomes the birth. The South Tower is the bride. The North Tower is the prophet. And so here I've picked up a Renaissance painting, or not a Renaissance paint, that sort of style or whatever. This it's a Claudio Coelho piece. Like, no idea if I'm saying that name correctly. I don't know much about the history of art, sadly. But it's an image of the Divine Family, and then I've changed all the colors and added in all these weird elements. Mr. N is holding, he's wearing a blue blanket, and he has an aluminum pot on his head. Yeah, that's a pun on pothead, of course. The bride is holding a rose and is dressed in red and crimson. And of course, that relates to Babylon the Great and these sorts of ideas. And then there's the child, the divine child in the middle, dressed in green, in the rewind slime, who wears the green glasses that perceives the correspondences, and whose hair, he's become a flaming head, and his mind has been blown. And up here we have the Holy Spirit helping in this situation. It's like literally the image has now bisected the atomic kid's head. And he has the red hand and the blue hand being guided. It's as if he's blind, and the divine figures are guiding his hands to reconstruct the image of eternity. There's a weird thing here I should maybe get out of the way explicitly or something. At some level, of course, I think about myself as being the atomic kid. So that's a weird, almost narcissistic thing here or something. But I think we're all Kid A. That's really the thing. We're all going to learn how to see this. So Kid A is like a god that just represents the process of witnessing this. The correspondence between 3 things, in a way. The Christ image, the 9/11 image, and all of its accidental in giant quotes, replications. So now we're still zooming. Now we're zooming towards the the monolithified image, the monolithic image, and it is like we're on the end of the track now. Here you see this red and blue and green in the middle thing that I've been showing you a million times over and over again. First, very subtly, just in the background of those Back to the Future quotes, and then increasingly explicitly with lines being drawn in the middle and so on. Now that it reaches crystallization, and we're zooming in and we're strobing black and white on the edges. It's again, now we have this pleroma idea. Out here is a world somehow of, it's static, but it's oscillating. Is it true or false? It somehow transcends that out here. There's a binary transcendence idea, which I would say is an important aspect of my piece, because then I bring it into the interior of Kid A's glasses. So it draws the connection already between the frames and the frame, which, by the way, I was not cognizant of when I made this film. I'm talking as if I planned a lot of this stuff. I didn't really. I follow the images and my intuitions. And like, wow, look how that works. Yeah, the frame and the frame. And the point of this frame is to see beyond the frame. And then from the standpoint beyond it, to see precisely the frame. That all makes sense. I bring in these flames now to imply, I think, something about the image already under erasure. This is not the image. This is a sketch. A sketch of an image that, again, to be clear, this is not the image. I am not the one who's going to make this image. I don't know who's going to make it. But there is an image that is going to match this image. And that image is going to carry the spiritual destiny of the human race for the next 2,000 years, okay? So that's my belief about that. And so I wanted to imply that with these burning flames. There's a union of opposites idea occurring here, because you see I'm also bending the image. The image is becoming watery, even as the flames appear in front of it. Got a one-track mind and it's all on you. So see, now it's on the divine child, though. And that's, again, I don't know how to talk about this stuff so clearly yet, but this is just a shift that's happened in me. I'm finally starting to get it. God really is a child. And so now we just seg into my little sort of promo at the end. I'm just saying, hey, go to archive.org and look where my journey began. Our pictures are not vulgar is a play on an ancient alchemical expression. Can you hear I'm a little choked up? It just is what it is. I'm just in a little bit of an emotional state, These things pass. But I cry a lot when I watch this film. To me, I'm very serious about this film. So, it's a joke. There's all kinds of hilarious stuff in this movie. I put things in there as jokes, Some of those things I put into the projection space map are like funny image selections to me. Like I could have easily chosen like a way less hilarious mouth, for instance. There's, all kinds of things. And then here, like, what is this? Like, this is a weird joke, It literally is kind of a joke. There's a pun here, handed matches. It's like Prometheus and the fire or something, But I invented that phrase in the context of a match, an image match that is handed in the sense of a left-right bifurcation. So I thought, that's great. I'll use a stock image of handed matches, but then it's also a picture, so that's also the picture side. So the picture that is the matches, that is the handed matches, and here's the text side, it's all the communication with the browser, and then that will direct you towards this big cache of my videos. So anyway, our pictures are not vulgar is an alchemical expression. And the alchemical, I'm building up to why this is so emotional. I'm going to get there. The alchemical, it's via this. The alchemical expression was something that was said about the gold. The alchemical gold was said to not be vulgar. I'm saying that these pictures, the pictures I've arranged in this film, are not vulgar. They're not here to shock or offend you. They're not here to make a meme or a joke about 9/11. They're not here to mock a particular kind of conspiracy ideation or something. And they're not even here to make a kind of abstract art piece about the nature of trauma and perception. They're here to mark the beginning of a new era of world historical time, in which time itself, or rather, our conception of time, is going to undergo a very major change. And it begins somehow with the Red Twins idea, in my opinion, and I feel very lucky to have done some work on it. Maybe even some seminal work on it, I don't know. At the same time, I feel very sad. Because there won't be a human race after this idea is understood. It really is the end of the human race in some sense. I want to say, of course, I mean that in a totally benign way. I'm not talking about an actual extinction event. I just mean there's going to be a big collective ego death around this. It's probably going to happen slowly, but at the end of the next 50 to 100 years, we're going to have to understand something very new about the nature of the image and about the nature of human creativity and what we're doing. We're telling ourselves things about the future when we make pictures. And we're going to learn how to read that. And I believe that's the real meaning of the Red Twins constellation. It's an instruction. It's here to teach us how to read this language. Once we read it, we're going to be living in a very different world in which we're probably going to use very sophisticated pattern detecting machines to amplify precognitive signals in human creative output and make predictions on the basis of those signals. So it is somehow about intelligence and about prediction. But anyway, so I cry sometimes because I have very intense feelings about this piece. I don't know, of course I can't tell anybody what it means in the end. I just gave you a bunch of insane ideas about what this piece means. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's just a bad YouTube video. Who knows if it even succeeds as a work of art? I can't know these things. And the things that I say I know, like I know that in 2,000 years there's going to be this big, I don't know those things either, of course. I'm just another monkey trying to make sense of all this. But I know those things to the best of my ability to know them. And beyond that, I don't know what to say about it. They impress themselves upon me as ideas to be reckoned with. So I just wanted to try to share it in a visual way. In a way, I think that Radical Rewind is a film for people that aren't alive yet. It's really for the future dead. People are around now that get it. I love those people. I love the people that don't get it. I love everyone who watches this. Thank you for watching it. It really means a lot to me, and I really do mean that. It's not necessary for me that people understand what I think Radical Rewind is about to relate to it, or to love it, or to have an opinion about it, or to have something to say about it. I don't know what it is yet either. Who knows? It's a very weird piece that I felt compelled to make during a very difficult period of my life. So, speaking here from a better space, in my little room here in Brooklyn with my art on the walls and surrounded by my instruments in the middle of making my album and pursuing this career editing video and making new friends and meeting interesting people and all of this. Looking back at the time I spent in Montana when I made Radical Rewind, just in a state, man. I didn't really want to be in Montana, and I knew a deep change was imminent in my life. I probably had to move to New York somehow. I didn't know how to make that happen. So now I'm here and I've made it happen, and wow, I have a whole life in New York. It's already included all kinds of surprising things, amazing things, and even, a little bit of romance and then sort of consecutive heartbreak and all that. I can look back now on this and say, this was a piece made by a person who really had something to prove. I don't know what it was exactly, but this piece was made in a kind of fever. Okay, well, that's my big summary about it. I end, of course, with Sweet Dreams are made of these matches. That's Stargate in the background, of course. I liked how this came together, kind of the Stargate stuff synchronizing with this weird thing that happens in here. I love the image because, of course, it's a match. That's such a strange Mr. N sitting over here. You got the gray pants, and then Annie Lennox and red hair. And then they're kind of in front of a bunch of albums. It's like Golden Records. Kind of implies like the Hall of Records. And they're holding hands and meditating. I just loved, I was so happy with how this worked. I was also happy about this, like dissolving. It just comes together nice. Like this does this weird stuff out here, and it dissolves the edges of the frame a little bit when that happens. She's looking right at you, but you can't hear what she's saying. So it implies the kind of unverbal language of the unconscious. You know, the image is speaking. Try to listen to it, that kind of thing. Get some little rainbow halos there, courtesy of the lens flares in the Stargate sequence. And then, of course, you know, she just does the most perfect thing here. She creates a little pair of twins there. And also points at the two major elements up here. Perceive the image and hear the explanation, and maybe you too will get a head on fire, just like I did. And so now I feel like it's all on you. She's looking at you. So now it's you, the viewer. It does end with a challenge. We're obviously moving through a death tunnel. So, you know, this is about the sort of the ego death arriving. And I just closed with this very simple picture of a prop element from Back to the Future Part 3. Here lies Emmett Brown, died September 7th, 1885. Well, 88 and then September 7th, you know, it's kind of all in the space. And then there is an interesting meaning to me here. Here lies Emmett Brown. Emmett, well, first of all, I'm trying to imply, of course, something about the death of time. Emmett Brown is really a time god. I consider these figures to be video gods. They are the new gods. And Emmett Brown is a early time god whose purpose was to die, to give birth to the new time god, which is maybe the Red Twins or the Atomic Kid or something yet, you know, TBD. But it's being anticipated right now in the imagery that artists are making and that I, myself and some other people are making. The new time god is going to be born, but this time god has died. And it's interesting that his first name, Emmet, in Hebrew means truth, Emet. And so it's also somehow about the death of truth, or about the death of the naive truth that we believed in previously, maybe. Yeah. Okay, that's it. That's Radical Rewind. I don't know how useful that will or won't be. You know, it'd be interesting to watch this back on the playback. This was a good way, I think, for me to spend my day. I enjoyed reconnecting with this piece. It's good. It's condensed and it's short, so it's nice when we slow it down. I'm not sure how long we've been talking, but this probably like made for a good episode length. Well, okay, so that was a nice little fun break from Michael Jackson stuff on this Halloween. You know, I'll say, since this is kind of like my personal, like I'm talking about my art here, and yeah, it's all blurry. Is it a sync research thing? Is it an art thing? I don't know. To me, in the end, this is very much an art film that I made about my research or something. Hey, someone got back to me. That's nice. You know, people exit your life, people enter your life. Ugh, it's the way of things. I needed some distraction today. This was a good way to provide it. Tonight, I might do some more work on Moonwalker. That might be another way to distract myself. You know, I'm just feeling kind of lonely, and I guess when I feel lonely, weirdly, I often don't want to go hang out with friends. It is sad. It is a kind of pick up my toys and go home response on some level. I'll just talk to my Wilson soccer ball, you know, instead. The ghosts never abandon me. They can't. We're bound together in some kind of weird blood magic thing now. So, you hang with them and you make art. You make art, and sometimes you make art that gets a piece from the future in it. This thing that I'm kind of suffering with today, I should qualify it all and say, it's not that bad. I haven't known this person very long. So in the grand scheme of things, there's just... I've experienced so much heartbreak and stuff in my life. I don't know that I'll even remember this one as a particularly potent one. I mean, I'll remember it. I'll remember the hurt of it and all this, but it's more that it was so symbolically loaded. Everything about my encounter with... Sorry, I am going to talk about this a little bit. I feel bad sometimes talking about things that involve other people on this channel, but it's my life, so I just got to a little bit. I'll do it, of course, in a way that doesn't reveal what I'm talking about. Keep it all kind of vague and abstract, but yeah, there's just this person. We met. We hung out a bunch. Every time we hung out, the sink was melting my brain. It was kind of all I could do to not instantly just like go to all these strange places in the conversation. You want to bring up all these synchronicities, say, hey, have you noticed all these crazy things are happening right now? And I actually did a little bit of that, but you don't want to overload people with that stuff, of course. And also, I don't want to be overloaded with it. It's like, why is it even happening? But so many of these syncs were directly related to this red twin stuff. Just like the red twins exploding out of the world in the most bizarre ways. So it's raised a bunch of questions for me. That this is the thing. I'm sad. It sucks. I don't like the way this panned out. Blah blah blah. But it also is. It's never been more clear to me that we really don't understand how synchronicity works. What is all this business? How can it be that... Because as far as I know, the red twins are an objective precognitive structure. They're a real transmission. That's kind of what this film is all about, Radical Rewind. It's not my subjective hallucination. Or if it is, I'm officially crazy. So maybe this is my film about me just being crazy. It's a film in which I'm like dumping in picture form a bunch of kind of religious beliefs that are too crazy to say in 2019 still. So I made them as images and now kind of accidentally shot myself in the foot by talking about them explicitly or something. That was always the idea on this channel. We're all about revealing all the secrets, Anyway. The intersection of the personal and the historical, and the cosmic and the earthly, and the past and the future, and the dead and the living, wow, these boundaries are all so thin. They are terribly, terribly thin, it seems to me. And maybe in the end, Radical Rewind is just a lot about that. And a lot of my work is about the thinness of that veil. It's so thin you can see through it. So... let's take a look. It's time now. 2020, it's time. I really think there is going to be a dropping of the veil. So, I guess we all have that to look forward to. I think it's going to involve this red twin stuff. I don't know. This might be just a foreshadowing. Perhaps this isn't the event. Perhaps there's another event that will transmit a signal of even greater precognitive strength. And that's the one that will blow this open. I don't think so, though. I think we already have it. We already have it. Now it's just a matter of learning to read. I thought I knew how to read already, and I didn't really. And so I think I know how to read now, and I probably don't really. There's probably many more things left to learn. But the intention was always to lead people to the mystery somehow. I don't know if I've succeeded in doing that or not, Who knows? I think I've led maybe a few people back to the mystery. Maybe I've done that so far. Maybe a few people that fell out of it a little bit and maybe... Who knows? That would make me very happy if that were true. I did that for me anyway. Somehow this did that for me, and it felt good, and it cured me of many neurotic impulses that I had. And someone recently told me that they thought I was sort of neurotic. I can be neurotic like anybody, but I quite reject that, in fact. I know what they meant, They meant that you're a little cuckoo, which is true. But that's what I'd like to say. You can be mad in a way that has nothing to do with being neurotic. I am quite mad, but I'm really not neurotic, and in fact, my madness was my cure for my neurosis. That's the big insight. If there is a big insight. So then you have a madness, though, and you have to deal with that somehow. So if you want to cure your neurosis, you might be able to cure it with a madness. Then you have to integrate the madness, or the madness will devour you. And so maybe that's what Jung figured out how to do. Maybe that's what individuation is. It's just integrating the mad, integrating the irrational, what I sometimes call the irreality, the irrational reality. So here's my little attempt to do that in my own weird way, my little YouTube video. It's like smash some stuff together and try to make infinity visible for a moment. Well, I had fun making it, I had fun hanging out. And all of that, I suppose, in the end was just to say, I don't know what all this stuff means exactly. But I know that there is healing in it. There may be other things in it, pitfalls and so on, but there's a potential for a healing draught. And so I would just very much like to share it with anyone who needs it, and that's just it. There's no ulterior motives here. I'm not gonna kind of turn around and become a conventional YouTube personality and make terrible content and ask you to subscribe every 2 seconds. That's just not what this channel's about. Thank you all who stuck around. The Ghostbusters analysis is going to be really good. I'm going to do some location shooting, probably. Actually, go around to, places where Ghostbusters was filmed and, do some stuff there. I don't know. Maybe. These are all dreams, ideas, one day. All right, folks. That's enough for now. See you in the future.